with our meeting for today. I want to wish everyone a very happy Sunday afternoon. The Tacuma district is immensely pleased to present a highly relevant and motivating workshop for its members. Now, coined as a workshop about work, the planners took into consideration our young people who are going out into the world of work very soon. And they need guidance in the areas of resume and CV writing, professional dress and equipment, and of course, interview preparation. Now, this initiative was designed to give a holistic coverage and to make our members walk away with the jobs that they actually go after. All right. Now, we're going to take you step by step and engage you in these three things and these three areas. All right. And to do this afternoon, we have gotten three tremendous individuals with a wide range of experience in their respective fields. And I want you guys to understand how truly blessed you are to have not just regional, but also international stars in the industries giving you the best tips and advice this afternoon. So before I go a little further, let me just see who's online with me. I'm seeing, okay, Jemima Gaines, Giselle Matthew, Kay King, Selena Jofield, Shally Fullerton, is it? Sydney Andrews from USC, and Suri Swan. Now, we had a little glitch in the invitation password, so we are expecting that more people will come online as we go on, and we do apologize for that. All right, please allow me now to invite the Holy Spirit to hover over us as we begin this session. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this beautiful opportunity to meet as a district and to engage the services of professionals to help guide our youth. We thank you and acknowledge your presence, and we ask that all goes well in your holy name. Amen. All right, guys. Now, we have three presenters, as I said, and I just want to give you a little idea of the format for this afternoon. We will have the opportunity to ask questions after each presentation. If you wish, you can always put up your hand at the end, of course, and I will acknowledge you. Or you can type your question in the chat, and I will take note of it to ask the presenters at the end of each session. Okay, so the choice is yours. You can either type it in the chat, or you can raise your hand if you want to interact, show your screen, and engage the presenter. So without further ado, let me get straight into the introduction of our first presenter. I had the opportunity to meet her just a short while ago, and right away I can sense her passion and her energy for her job. So we're going to have first up Ms. Ashley Belmar, who has worked in human resources for the past decade. And this is within the Caribbean region with various companies such as Unicoma Group and presently the Venus Group, where she serves as the HR and Talent Development Manager. Ashley is certified and licensed in a vast array of various aspects of HR recruiting and management. Okay, so the combination of her education as well as career experience allows her to share her expertise with us today. A very warm Tacuma welcome to Ms. Ashley Belmar.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you guys again for giving me the opportunity to present this afternoon. As the presenter would have stated, I have approximately a decade worth of experience in HR, and today I'll be going through with you some tips to consider while preparing your resume. Again, feel free to ask any questions at the end of this segment. And if I'm unable to answer any questions, feel free to share them with Larissa, and she should be able to pass it on to me, and I would share my contact information. Due to the time constraints, and I know another presentation is supposed to start at 3 o'clock, I may briefly go through some of the areas. Again, if you have any concerns, please let me know. So before I go into my presentation, I think the most important thing I'm going to tell you today is when you're preparing your resume, you should be very intentional about what you would like to say and who you are presenting your resume to. So previously, and I would like to say before the pandemic, persons may have general or generic resumes that they will send to numerous employers. Now that recruiters, hiring managers have robots that will sort through resumes, you would notice, or at least for us, some resumes don't get filtered because you are not intentional with the keywords and you do not stick to what is required. So again, being intentional, ensuring that your resume speaks to what is needed or what is asked from the ad is ultra important. The first thing when preparing your resume, when getting started to prepare your resume, is to ensure that your contact information is clearly stated on the document. Many times I receive resumes and I cannot contact the individual for many reasons. Sometimes the number is wrong, sometimes the email address is invalid. And there's the first opportunity that a potential candidate loses for getting a job. As I mentioned, a lot of the resumes that we get now are via Caribbean Jobs or some kind of soft platform. It means that when I get a resume, initially what will happen is the platform will filter those resumes for me. And as you know, when you go on Caribbean Jobs, sometimes you will see questions, and these questions will say things like, what is your salary expectation? Do you have the experience that is required? Give us your information. If you do not answer those questions, the robot will automatically put your resume to the end of the pile, and it will actually never reach to the recruiter. Some of the robots that are available, what I use, if your contact information is invalid and we were unable to send an automatic reply to you, again, your resume will never reach to my desk. Another thing I would like to mention, now that most resumes are soft copy, your email address, and if you're gonna put a professional online link, for instance, LinkedIn, ensure that those links are live. Yes, we actually do check professional platforms. And I can tell you, I check it. I don't necessarily go on Instagram, I don't go on Facebook, but I do go on LinkedIn. It is the first avenue for me to get to know you a little bit, get to know your brand, get to know if the information you are sharing with me on this CV is accurate. Many times I see that persons will share their LinkedIn platform, and then when I go on the platform, I notice that you left out some information that may or may not be important to me, and you may have left out some experience or job experience that you may have. The first question that comes to mind is, why would you negate sharing a particular job experience with me? Are you trying to hide something? So this is important to ensure once you're going to share any kind of platform URL with your potential employer, it is important that the information that you share is accurate to what you're sharing on your resume. The next thing I would like to highlight to you is the importance of a headline. And there's a difference between a headline and an objective on your resume, and I will go through that with you. As I mentioned, recruiters and hiring managers initially just spend a few minutes on any resume in the initial stages when we are filtering through. So it is very important that the headline that you choose is impactful and it's powerful. So headline should clearly communicate who you are and what you do. Position yourself for the type of job you are pursuing. So initially I mentioned to you generic resumes are not the way to go anymore. If you're applying for a particular job, it is important that you use those key words that your recruiter or hiring manager is looking at to increase your probability of being shortlisted. Again, integrating keywords that are essential to both human and electronic resume readers. You will notice through this presentation, I focus a lot on the electronic resume readers, right? Because when I put a job out, normally we would receive minimum, especially during the pandemic, no less than 1,000 applications. And it means that I will not sit down and go through those 1,000 applications, and I would allow the robot to do that for me. So if you do not identify or use the keywords that I am particularly looking for the job, your probability of being shortlisted is very low. Instantly, once you have an impactful headline, you would showcase your brand to the recruiter. You would showcase any extra career activities that you would have been involved in, and this will highlight to the recruiter why we should continue or why we should even pursue a relationship with you. So here's the difference. It is important to know that many people confuse their headline and your objectives, but it is actually not the same. When you are writing your headline, you are basically telling the recruiter, or you are saying to the employer, this is what I want from the employer. Right? When you're doing an objective, you are saying to the recruiter, this is what I want. Whereas when you're doing a headline, you're saying to the recruiter, this is what I bring. This is the value that I bring to the organization. So if you start as an objective, if you start your resume with an objective, like the example I have here, you may say, seeking a position where I can utilize my extensive background in corporate training and development. Whereas if you just use a headline, again, keywords based on what the recruiter is looking for, you can simply say corporate training and development professional. So if this person here is applying for, in the HR department, a training and development officer role, immediately, instantly, I know that this person has corporate training and development experience, and then I will want to see more. If I am not going through the resume and the robot is going through the resume, same thing. It would look at these keywords and it would say, yes, this resume, does it by percentage, is something that I think could possibly fit the job that we are looking for. There are a few ways you can actually write a headline. And the first way is the example I gave before, where it's just a single line. Another option you have is to do multiple line headlines. What that means is that you can focus on key areas. The first area you can focus on or have the opportunity to, this is another opportunity to use in terms of format and style, is skills focus. This is when core competencies matter the most for the job. So the example I have here is an HR manager applying, and she's obviously allowing the recruiter to know that these are the functional areas in HR that she has expertise in. For this particular job, it may be important. Now, if I was this HR manager and I was applying for a job, maybe in a unionized environment, one of the things I would include here is that I have industrial relations experience, because that will be important to the recruiter. That is something that the recruiter will want to know instantly. And even if I may not have all of the other things, IR, or industrial relations, is very important for a environment that is unionized. Similarly, if you are in HSC and maybe before you were a HSC coordinator and you were doing risk assessments, and there are particular risk assessments that you can be certified in, and you are now applying for a HSC officer position, it is very important in this stage, if you decide to focus on the skills that you have, that you highlight. I can do risk assessments based on ergonomics. I can do risk assessments based on X, Y, and Z, so that the recruiter knows this person comes with these skills, and these are the skills for this person to be successful within my organization. Another option you can use is focusing on the industry. This is when experience in the sector is very important, or it matters the most to the employer. So in this case, the example I have here, this HR manager is applying to a consumer goods industry. So they would have decided to highlight some of the important attributes that went along with that industry. If I was applying for a position now, because I have worked both in retail, manufacturing, and distribution, depending on the organization that I am working with, I would say here, maybe if it's manufacturing, retail, and then I can say regional role. Then I could say governance, because from a group perspective, these are the things as important. And if I'm applying for another role that may be of a similar position to mine, they will want to know the level of accountability and responsibility that I had. So for this, for the industry, it's important that you understand what you need to highlight if you decide to use this format. Another option you can use is if you focus on the company. So where you have worked matters most. And a good example of this is if you used to work, let's just say in Atlantic, and you're now interested in applying for a job at a smaller oil and gas company. Immediately, if you put 22 years Atlantic, BP, Shell, and all of these popular oil and gas companies, it will catch the eye of an employer. Why would it catch their eye? It's very simple. Of course, they will see these bigger companies as competitors, but they will also see these companies as benchmark organizations. They would like to be more like them. They would like to understand their day-to-day functions. And the best way to understand that is if you hire someone that used to work in that particular environment. So again, in this case, you may not want to focus on your skills, but you may want to focus on the fact that I have worked in a company that matters, and I know based on what I would have learned, I can share this with you. The last and final way in terms of headlines you can possibly use is by focusing on your credentials. This is personally not, I think, the most appetizing depending on the industry. There are industries and sectors that are very focused on credentials, like the educational sector. There are other industries that are not necessarily focused on that. Yes, it's important. Yes, they would like to know that you have the qualifications, but it's not the first thing that brings you in the door. And if you feel as though it's not the first thing, I would say this is not the option to go with. Personally, if I ever have to apply for a job, I will not start by showing my credentials. I will start by highlighting either the companies I have worked in or the skills that I will bring to the table that is relevant to the organization. Another option is branded headlines. Branded headlines give you the opportunity to do a mixture of any of the above that I would have mentioned, and just share a little bit about yourself. And when I opened this presentation, I mentioned that sometimes recruiters, well, at least I do it. I will go on LinkedIn and I will check your LinkedIn profile. And it is because of that. I want to understand your brand, because I understand the brand that my company wants, the values that we want to live. And I'm trying to get a little glimpse of, okay, is this person going to fit into our brand? Can this person live the values that we live, right? So you do have the opportunity from a headline perspective to give some of this information to the recruiters immediately. All right. I was not going to say if anybody has any questions, but I remember the questions are to the end. Another thing to focus on when writing your resume is ensuring that your resume match your career level. I know generally we will go on Google and we can go on Word and we will just Google resume and we'd say, okay, well, we like this particular template and I want to move forward with it. That is not correct depending on your level you are or the level of career you are, right? So for graduating students, it is very important that you start with highlighting your degree, your major, any academic honors that you may have had, any activities that you would have been a part of, especially leadership roles. You can also take the opportunity to include 4 to 6 classes or list projects that would show strengths based on the job that you are applying for. Why is this important? Because it is a good conversational piece. I'm sure some of you may have been in interviews and you would hear the recruiter say to you, well, tell me about a project you would have done. Or did you do any HSC courses while you were at your while you were studying? Tell us a little bit about that. If you highlight it instantly, then it starts the conversation and the employer or the recruiter has an opportunity to ask more and pry. If you feel, because you may have some experience in terms of doing internships and so forth, you do not have to put it in this category. You can decide to put it in your professional experience right under your education. But again, if you have just graduated, you need to focus on the fact that, hey, I have my degree, these are the things that I studied, this is what I have brought, this is what I can bring to the table. For a young professional, this is after you have worked maybe 1 to 2 years. Your resume will change, and the first thing you would highlight is actually your work experience, and then you will go into your educational experience. At this stage, you do not need to go into details and list all of the courses that you would have done, projects you would have participated in, because the truth is now you have experience in the field. And what's going to be the conversation starters are the items coming under your job experience, not necessarily what you would have learned in school. And as we are on that point, normally when I go through resumes, especially persons who are transitioning from graduating students to young professionals, I would still see the list of all the courses, or I would see your GPA, or I would see all of the CXC passes that you would have acquired. Again, when you reach the young professional stage, that is not important unless on the job ad, it asks for that in particular. So if you're applying for a job and you see that they say, you must have a 1 in math, then fine. It's good to highlight it, because if the recruiter is skimming through, they will instantly see that you meet the minimum requirements. And if the robot is skimming through, again, that will pick up that you meet the minimum requirements. But once you move into young professional, you do not need to elaborate on those things anymore. I have 5 CXC passes, I have a degree, I have a minor. You may want to continue to put the extracurricular activities if you are still involved, but is it necessary? Is it necessary at the young professional stage? No, because at that time, as I said, you already have experience. You have worked for 2 to 3 years, and that is what I am now interested in. How well did you work? Were you able to accomplish what was necessary? The last career level is experienced professionals, right? Again, at this point, you already have your experience. So yes, you will start with your experience and then you will go to your educational, all your educational qualifications, right? As I mentioned with the young professionals, try to limit expanding the educational qualifications unless it is necessary or you want to highlight something that you think that the recruiter is going to look for. Focus more on the experience that you bring to the table. Now, I know one of the sessions you guys are going to go through is, I think, interview skills, right? Or paying for an interview. There are different types of interviews, and one type of interview is actually called competency skills interviews. And in competency skills interviews, they look at the situation you were in, what you did, and what was the results. When you reach a professional, experienced resume, you need to highlight these things. And I believe I have an example in the next slide, and you will see the transition in terms of the wording for your resume. Right. So in terms of describing your professional experience, I feel sometimes that this is something that we take for granted, but this part of your resume actually is the part that gets you into the door, and is the part that makes or breaks some interviews because of what is placed here. As I was alluding to before, in some organizations, especially multinational organizations, they are very clear that they use competency-based interviews. So they have questions and they know what they're going to ask you, and they score you based on how well you describe the situation, how well you say what you did, and how well you were able to achieve whatever was placed in front of you, or even not achieve it. In this section, the action verbs that you use are important. The action verbs that you use says to the recruiter, this person has experience. This person has been accountable for this particular task. This person is ready to move to the next level. So I'll give you an example. If you I'll go back to HSC. I don't know why that is on my mind, but if you are an HSC coordinator and you are moving into an HSC officer role, as a coordinator, some of the key words you may use is coordinate or assist, or maybe not partner with, but more of coordinate or entry or things like that, right? But when you are trying to apply for an officer role, yes, you have coordinated, but you need to show a little more. Coordinated, successful HSC initiatives, and say what that meant to the organization if there was a benchmark given to you. Because then what the recruiter will do is ask more questions. Tell me how you were able to do this, who you had to work with, why weren't you successful, what did you learn from this situation. Again, it's just an opener to get the conversation going. The example I have here is an HR person applying for a position. And the HR person says, assisted with the implementation of a new human resource information system to automate the company's recruitment process. Now, for an entry-level position, this is acceptable because you can see that maybe this person is a HRA or they're HR coordinator. So when they say assist, they may have done a duty or so within the entire project. And then we will harness on that and ask questions. Now, if you are HR officer, senior HR officer, or HR lead, my expectation is on your resume, you would write something like this. Worked in partnership with the technology department to implement a new human resource information system and automated the company's global recruitment process, delivered the project 2 months ahead of schedule and 15% under budget. instantly the conversation changes. Again, 15% under budget. All employers love to hear this. How did you accomplish this? What did you do? Were you under budget because you cut corners? Were you under budget because you did things more efficiently? You found a better way to do it? Conversation pieces so that the employer gets to know you a little bit more. Oh, you were 2 months ahead in terms of the project. What did you have to do? Well, I worked nights and day. I worked to, overtime to ensure that this project was done. And then that may bring a question like, do you have work-life balance, or what is work-life balance to you? Because the employer wants to know more about you. If this is very important to the company, would you go above and beyond? And this little statement here says that. And you can tell by these two statements that at least I will be able to tell if I'm reading your resume where you actually fall in an organization. And one of the things I will always say, I'm actually noticing I'm missing 2 other slides, so I'll just talk through it. But one of the things I will always say as it relates to this is don't overcompensate or don't put things on your resume that you have not experienced and you cannot speak to. So if you have not experienced something, you were not accountable for it, ensure that you don't expand on it, because we will ask questions and we'll want to know how, because there's probably a possibility that we are looking to do something similar and we think that, okay, maybe you could head this project. So yes, I'm missing 2 slides. So I think I remember most of it in my head. The other thing I wanted to talk to you guys about was your education qualifications. And I spoke about it earlier. Yes, you can share all of your qualifications, but you do not need to go into details with, okay, if you say you were honors, you don't need to say that your GPA was 4.5. It actually means nothing to us because we don't know what that means in your particular school. And it really doesn't add any value. So good, your honors, great. What you did to get there, great. But the fact is that you have your degree. Similar, you may do short courses. Some short courses are relevant, some are not. If you're applying for a job and maybe you are a young professional, so you have experience in CPR or fire warden, or you did defensive driving, all of these certifications have a 2-year span. So if the 2 years have passed, there's no need to put it on your resume. Additionally, unless it's within the same organization, it actually does not apply. So if you work in Petrogen and you did fire warden in Petrogen, fine. You could continue to put it there if you're applying for a position there. But if you're applying for a position in another organization, there's no need. If you want it as a conversational piece, you can think about a way to bring it in as an example to maybe show your leadership skills and etc. But it is not necessary here. Similar, if there are some, not necessarily certification, but if I use myself as an example, I have accreditation to do some HR training under SHRM, right? As you can see here. And under SHRM, each year there are a minimum amount of courses that I need to do in terms of participating in and also facilitating. If I do not do that minimum amount of courses after I have acquired my qualification, it is actually null and void. So if I go to apply for a position and I say, well, I am SHRM certified, and the person similar to me knows that there are some things that you need to do, and they start to ask me, okay, Ashley, so what was the last training you facilitated? And then I have to stumble to say, well, after, I did the qualifications, I haven't had time. Again, you're not being truthful because it actually is not accurate. It doesn't stand right now because you have not been keeping up with it. So be mindful of those things when you're putting any certificates, any qualifications on your resume. Similar to skills. A lot of times when I see skills, people will say one of my skills is good event planning or intercommunication or I'm analytical. And then we say, hey, I see here in your resume, you said that you are analytical. Give me an example of a time that you were this or you possess these qualities. And then you can't answer. So once it's on your resume, know that there's an opportunity for the person who is recruiting to ask you a question. And if you cannot answer the question, sometimes you feel as though the interview is a little bit choppy. And it's because the recruiter is also trying to find out, okay, what is a conversational piece? How do I keep this going based on what you have presented to me? Again, in those instances, once you put something, I am analytical, I told you about competency-based interviews. Give me a situation in which you are analytical. What did you do and how successful were you? If you cannot come up with that, do not put it on your resume. And I think that is actually it. I may have missed some things, but as I said in the beginning, if you have a resume, you'd like to share it with me, or you have any questions I may not be able to answer, please feel free to reach out and I will try my best to help. I'm really passionate about this because I really do see a lot of resumes on a daily basis. And sometimes I want to help, or sometimes I even feel gut feeling that the person could do the job, right? But because the resume is so hard to read, I can't continue. I have to just stop and say, you know what, on to the next one. And sometimes that's not fair because you just missed an opportunity at a split second to be interviewed and potentially get a position just because your resume was not easy to read. And it's just really important.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Belmar, for that presentation. I know most people would have been taking notes. I took a few notes myself, and what I summarized, essentially, from what you said, you need some headlines to grab the person's attention, the recruiter's attention. You probably only have one shot at it. So guys, you need to get it right, okay? You need to follow the advice here. I am particularly interested in knowing if you guys have a time limit for interviews. Is it something that you say, well, we'll just spend 15 minutes, so you ask, a standard number of questions, or is it sort of dynamic and you engage the person? Let's say the person is chatty and they like speaking about themselves. They may even have questions for you. I have seen occasions where the interviewee try to manage the interview and try to take over sometimes. I mean, I wouldn't have asked the guys unless you're really, really confident. But tell me about the time limits and if, just to guide people, do you chat a lot? Do you just try to sort of, make up some time because, at the back of your mind, maybe if you talk a little bit more, they'll ask you a little less. I don't know. Tell us.
It really depends on the position that you're interviewing for. So for an entry-level position, maybe we would say a half an hour to 45 minutes. And that's a lot of time, which is why I stressed on the fact, build your resume based on where you are in your career. If you highlight things that you would have done in school, courses that you would have done, we then spend a lot of time on that. And once you start telling me about a project that you did in school, it could actually take you 5 to 6 minutes to go through. And then I ask you questions and then it leads into something else. So when you just do your resume as a young professional, in this example, and you just say, okay, I have my degree, I have no idea what to ask you. I'm kind of fishing, and because of that, your interview may last 15 minutes. And if your interview lasts 15 minutes, honestly, it's highly unlikely that you get through because in that 15 minutes, we may not be able to get to know you. If it's a professional position or an executive position, sometimes that goes into an hour to an hour and a half. Why? Because the conversation is sweet. And like the example I gave you, once you say to a business, I have achieved a task, and the milestone is saving money or ahead of time, I want to know how and why. That is a conversation by itself that could be extensive. And you may find in interviews that we take long on one particular matter and you are hired. And it's because outside of your resume, your brand and who you are have captivated the recruiter.
Right. So essentially, you would have heard what you needed to hear to
Correct.
give the job, and it matches, of course, with their professional experience.
Correct.
I don't see any questions in the chat. I'm just looking to see if I have any raised hands. Guys, don't be shy. Miss Belmar is here to answer your questions. Okay, I'm seeing a hand. Who is that? Zuri. Okay, so you can unmute and ask your question.
So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Zuri. I have 3 questions actually. Yeah. So let me try to make sure and see if I could explain it good enough so that I could get them answered. So my first question is, I know most of the time as time goes by and technology upgrades and all these different things, for the person who's now starting off in the world of work, sometimes we tend to focus on the style or the theme of the resume itself. All right. What would you suggest would be a decent template, or what would we have to focus on in terms of having our resume appealing or not too distracting to the recruiter? Do I ask all 3 questions together, or do you want me to ask it one by one and get them answered and then go along like that?
Actually, I lost you on part of that question, so I'll actually need you to repeat it. Sorry.
Okay. Let me probably make it simpler. I know most of the times when we now start, we are so self-conscious about our resume itself. Sometimes we put so much information, but in terms of the style itself or the theme of the resume, it may be not appealing to the recruiter, or it may be too distracting. What would you suggest, or what would be something that we need to pay attention to so that we don't cross both not being appealing and being too distracting when it comes to resume?
What I would say is pay a particular attention to the ad. The ad very clearly identifies what the recruiter is looking for, and if it's through Caribbean jobs, what the robot will literally go through and highlight for us. So if the ad says that they want to know that you have 5 CXC courses, don't elaborate on that. Just say 5 CXC courses. So pay a particular attention to what the job is asking for and use keywords from that job.
Okay, Zuri, you had 2 other questions. I also have 3 questions in the chat. So can you go ahead?
Oh, sorry, my mic was giving a problem. Yeah. So my second question is, I know when we were dealing with the section of being descriptive and detailed about the jobs that you would have worked and all of these different things, what should you keep in mind so that you don't go overboard in your resume writing, so that when it is the interview does reaches, you would be able to have enough information to have a conversation with the interviewer?
Okay. Again, I'll actually go back to the job description, because if you're applying for a job and it says that, let's just say you are in food safety. I don't know why HSC and food safety is on my mind, but you are in food safety and they are looking for someone that has worked in a manufacturing plant, looking for someone who have done particular audits or certified in audits. Those are the points that you want to highlight as it relates to your experience. But the things that may be extras is not necessary for you to include. It's just too much. I've seen resumes where, in terms of the bulletins, it's a page under each work experience. That is too much. You're actually going into details of duties instead of just sticking to the functional area. The functional area is audits. For example, just put food safety audits, and maybe you can say successfully completed a food safety audit for Yum, which is a provider locally. And it is it's a big provider. So once you highlight something like that, the employer knows, okay, they have a particular structure that they would go through, and I could then harness on that and ask questions.
Okay, the last question slipped me. So let somebody else ask their question, and maybe along the way I'll remember, and then I'll put up my hand again.
Okay.
Thank you, though.
Thank you so much for your question. Janila would like to know, should you really include hobbies or interests, I will extend, in your resume?
As a graduate resume, yes, because again, you're looking for conversational items. I would say include things that you think would add value. So for example, if you put while you were in school, you were into event planning and you are applying for a customer service position, something in HR, something that would have that kind of interaction, then yes, put it. Because then I would say to you, hey, you may be a people person because you were involved in this activity, and this is important to my business. Other things I would not necessarily put, but it all depends on the position you're applying for. It's not a copy and paste at all. And there are some things that you would see as important. If, for example, you're applying to an organization and they have a sports club that you know of, okay, you can put that you are a football player. Again, another conversational piece, so that the person will know that you will be a part or engaged in the activities that the organization have.
Okay, great. Renee Joseph would like to know if your resume should be any length in particular. So
I would say no more than 2 pages. No more than 2 pages.
And then also you mentioned about the robots that might be going through this stuff, right? So we have to keep in mind the age we are existing in. So correct. A 4-page, 5-page, as I mentioned, technology. I have seen, particularly the millennials, have taken to videos for their resumes. I wanted to bring that up with you, because I don't know if you have received such in your line of work as an HR person. Have you received, instead of somebody writing or sending a written formal resume, a video of themselves?
I have actually received videos. In some positions, I actually encourage it. I don't necessarily go through the resume, and I ask for work. So for instance, we have a digital marketing team, and I ask them for their portfolio before anything else, because I want to see a style. I want to make sure it's aligned with our brand, and then I could interview you. Your resume is not as important as your portfolio in that case. So for those jobs, yes, I do. Just ask for the portfolio and they send me videos. You mentioned something that I want to make sure I'm clear on in terms of the robots, right? The robots actually take the resumes and they give us a percentage in terms of how would this person be successful in the role. So if I get 100 resumes and the robot shortlist 10 for me, it would say out of the 10, these 5 are 65%, and the others are 45%. And I have the opportunity then to determine if I want to just start with the 65%, as the robot said, based on the keywords that you used, or if I just interview everyone.
Okay. But I guess it really helps when you have to filter out like 1,000 resumes for a particular position. I mean, nobody has time to do that. We have actually a question from our next presenter, Mr. Sean Neal out of Antigua. He would like to know, at what stage should persons start to think about paying for a professional resume coach or editor?
I think at any stage. I will personally share just recently, because I know businesses and people visit my profile on LinkedIn. I have actually considered it because I realize my LinkedIn page is my resume. So I have considered getting someone to redesign it. It's not that I'm looking for a job, but it is a part of your brand. So if you want to carry a particular brand and you know that you cannot do it on your own, it is fine to ask a professional any stage of your career.
I guess, Mr. Mail, it will actually matter then at the stage you're in, what your pocket can afford. Because if you're just out of school, you may not be able to pay, a professional quite yet, but you may be able to engage somebody that you trust or that can help you do it. But by all means, if you need that extra help and advice, you should seek it, okay, to get your foot in the door. I see no other hands or questions, and it's actually 3:00 on the dot. So I want to thank Ms. Ashley Belmar so much for her presentation this afternoon. I learned quite a bit from you. I know time doesn't permit us to go into all the things that, your job entails, but I think you would have given us a very good start into how we can grab that attention with your headlines and how we can get our foot in the door. Okay, so Ashley,
thank you guys.
Thank you from the Tacuma district, and please, we wish you all God's blessings in your job and in your future endeavors.
Thank you guys, and enjoy the rest of the presentations.
Okay, great.